Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Logistics Lager Lounge. I'm very pleased and thankful that our guest today is Bob Black. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bob.
Thank you, David. Good to see you.
Good, good. Yeah. So you're an expert, or perhaps you can give us a quick overview. I know your overview, but maybe for our viewers and listeners, can you give us a quick overview of your history, please?
Yeah, no problem. So, unfortunately, been in logistics for over 40 years. Most of my career in logistics was with TNT. So, I worked for TNT for just over 30 years, starting off a summer job, in the summer holidays whilst I was at uni. Then it transitioned into a more permanent fixture after that, working in the warehouse. I drove for a year. Going to be a bit of fun, and really that fun turned into a career of 30 years. I ended up with TNT being the CEO of Australia and the Pacific, working on the Asia Pacific board at Singapore, on M&A in China. So very interesting 5 years down there in Australia with those guys. And then I moved to Australia Post as Group COO of the whole postal organisation and CEO of their parcel business called StarTrack, doing 5 years there on a whole transformation programme, which was amazing fun, meeting amazing people and working in that sector, fully government owned in Australia, so slightly different to the dynamics of Royal Mail. And then returned to the UK when COVID hit in 2020. And since then, I've been working in advisory roles, strategic advisory, some board positions, consulting all around logistics. So I work with Blue Yonder on TMS, WMS, OMS systems, mainly in the sector. And I work for TMX Transform, who are a consultancy based in Australia, again on strategic network design projects. Worked for a year with McKinsey as a consultant, and do some consulting off my own back as well. So a real mixture of things, but all heavily involved in the logistics postal carrier sector, because that's obviously my core competence. And as long as I can keep adding value, I'll keep doing it. And when I feel the end of the road's near for my value and worth, I'll move on and take it easy, put my feet up. But at the moment, it's a crazy industry that's really been heightened in terms of its importance, probably since COVID in 2020, showing how supply chains are so critical to everything that we do. And of course, today with what's going on in the Middle East, again, showing the criticality of a strong, robust, efficient supply chain network. So, yeah, whilst it lasts, it's good. And I'm happy to be involved in it. And of course, happy to be here talking to you today, David.
No, thank you. And you're probably in a good position to answer this question. What do you think are the biggest challenges to the logistics industry right now? There's a lot going on in the world. What do you think the biggest issues are?
I think regardless of whether you operate locally, fully domestically, internationally, whether you're a global supply chain, one of the world leaders in that, I think disruption has shown that, and whether it's economic or transportation disruption, has shown how important supply chains are. That's where we began this conversation. And if you look at the Middle East now, it's not just, everybody highlights fuel, but it's aggregates and it's food, it's e-com, it's absolutely everything. Of course, over the last 50 years, well, for centuries, global e-commerce has been important to the world. But actually, in the last 50 years, where people have offshored and pushed production overseas, it's become more and more vital for us. So I think that robust, flexible network, which I'd have said was the most important thing 10 years ago, I think over the last 5 years has shown to be absolutely imperative in how you run your business. And of course, when I say a flexible and robust network, you've got to look at how you've built your business over the last, whether you're a new entry in the last 4 or 5 years or the last 12 months, or whether you've been around for 50 years, 60 years, or like Royal Mail, 500 plus years. You've got to continue to transform. And I think with the speed of the global economy, and think we saw the biggest impact in change with e-com in the early 2000s, how that moved on, and then things like COVID, which then really drove significant growth into those channels. How if you're not transforming your business, if you're not continuing to develop your own business model to make the efficiencies and the optimization that are required, then you will fall behind. And we've seen lots of businesses over the last 4 decades since I've been involved, we've seen lots of businesses that haven't been able to adapt and transform and actually just gone out of business because their cost bases increase, their value add to the clients decrease, they lose business, they usually yield, and eventually they just can't sustain their network. So I think it's critically important that businesses continue to develop, transform, adapt, build robust systems into their business so that they can maintain strong service levels and partnerships with their clients.
No, I really appreciate that, and sort of tying on to that. So, how do you see technology as it continually changes, and with AI and automation changing the game? Do you think it will radically change it, or will be more continually subtle?
No, I think the speed of transformation has for many years been increasing. You know, the velocity of change just continues to increase. If I look at the first 20 years of my career through the 80s and 90s, change was slow. You know, dummy terminals in the mid 80s didn't really change to anything in terms of smarts for 10 years. Whereas now we see things changing, you know, 1 year, 6 months, 3 months, you can see that change. AI will be an increasingly important factor in logistics because forecasting has been done on spreadsheets for many years. What we forecast is we might take the last 12 months, we do quarter on quarter analyst. We do year on year. We look at the analytics from a year on year point of view, and we drive a forecast from that. But AI is able to bring in a host of data, so consumer spend, economy, GDP, trends in business, where things are growing, where things are decreasing, how it's moved over the last years, what's influenced it and what's impacted it. And therefore, the ability to build strong forecast models based on, like I say, a whole host of data will become very, very efficient for companies to use. And then you'll be able to use things like simulation tools to be able to look at how your networks will cope with that. So I think it's going to be a fundamental change. And the other thing you mentioned there was automation. Well, automation is just a must-have. You know, we can no longer look at how we manually move things around. Automation is fundamentally important to a logistics business because as volume grows, you can't keep putting more man hours onto those processes. At some point, you've got to switch to a fully automated system. So I think automation just follows the ongoing trend. The more, the better. I think AI and forecasting will become much more sophisticated and relevant. And therefore, you want to have simulation tools that will be able to show you exactly how you're going to handle that. And then if you look broader at that, and one of the things that I see Blue Yonder working on, for instance, and the CEO at Blue Yonder talks about using AI to look at the whole end-to-end supply chain to eradicate waste from commerce. So not only does it look at the trend for what's being consumed, but it'll match that consumer demand with manufacturing demand. So in other words, we'll take a lot of waste out of supply chains where, you know, we see so much go to landfill, we see so much waste within the networks, and we'll start reducing that because we'll plan and forecast so much more efficiently and so much better that we'll be able to really match that consumer demand with the production and manufacturing demand. So I think it's going to be significant. I think it'll be significant. And again, the change in the next 3 to 5 years will be accelerated from what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years for sure.
And on sort of, you know, being a wise owl on this industry, do you think consolidation will continue, or will the disruptors, and there's some big significant disruptors that are relatively new, change the world?
Yeah, it's a great question, and like I'll probably take the easy option here. I think both, because
Yeah,
I think consolidation will still continue. There's always been consolidation, and even with the disruptors coming in, the big players, then often a disruptor comes in with a view that in 3 to 5 they want to sell out anyway to one of the larger players. So you'll always get that acquisition of the small disruptors that come in to consolidate market. We've probably in the UK seen near the end of the large scale consolidation in the parcel industry. Whereas if you went back to the 80s and 90s, we'd over 25 national carriers, fully fledged networks, national carriers. We've under 10 now. So I think to see more consolidation in that would be quite difficult. What we have seen though is some interesting partnerships, joint ventures, coming together. We've definitely seen the DHL and Every, for instance, which I didn't see coming at all. I don't know about you, but that wasn't one that came left field for me. And that's an interesting consolidation there, where we'll see that as an Every premium delivery, the DHL side, and it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And of course, the InPost acquisition of Yodel, which is, and through this year, then it'll be rebranded. So we've now got a parcel locker business fundamentally buying a network business, when prior to that, it was always the network businesses buying up the parcel locker businesses. So we've seen how strong they are in the Eastern Bloc countries, especially Poland, how they've used that leverage there to then come into other markets and be very successful here. And I guess, we could move on from that saying, and what drives that? Well, Vinted is significant here. Vinted is a significant player here. Youth are today locker to locker, cheaper delivery for them. There's lots of things around that choice, convenience, but we've seen Vinted drive sort of that out of home locker business. So I think there will be more consolidation. And I definitely think the disruptors will come in and will disrupt some of the larger players. So there might be some acquisition of those. But I think to tackle it, you'll see, more partnerships, even Royal Mail partnering with Collect Plus and being able to expand their out-of-home delivery through that network. So I think in that last 18 months, we've seen a number of these, not necessarily joint ventures, but partnerships or JVs, that come to fruition to really supercharge the market, and really look for those white spots. How can you fill the white spots with maybe not investing as much in the white spot, because you still want to invest in your network and your transformation? So do you build partnerships that can fill those points and give you a value added to go to your consumers with and your customers?
And there seems to be a lot of passion about customer experience, given the customer experience. And I did a podcast earlier today with someone from the returns world, and it's really interesting. And then you get cross-border returns. And I think something like, for an e-commerce business, I think something around 20 to 25% of their revenue actually is part of that is returns. So the younger demographic almost, bracket orders 2 or 3 to bring one back. But what we were talking about earlier is that if your returns is as simple as can be process and painless, it makes you go back to that e-commerce retailer, company. It's really interesting.
Yeah, that the whole out of home with e-com, stems from that. Where does it start from? It starts with the parcel going to a consumer. Not always now. That's changed to consumer to consumer, re-commerce as they call it. But if you take it from some time ago, it was that. We know that returns rate, especially in clothing, especially in adult clothing, I should say. Children clothing is a much lower returns rate, but adult clothing is around, like, say, 25%, 1 in 4, often 2 sizes ordered, or 4 dresses, 4 shirts, 2 different colors, 2 different sizes to try them on. standard, so we know that's going to be returned. So when we look at parcel lockers and drop-off points, convenience, ease of use are really, really important in that sector. So from a returns point of view, the easier you make the return, the more convenient you make it, and of course the cheaper you make it, and the better that is. And we see some brilliant use of technology by the likes of, say, Amazon, in terms of returns, who really direct their customers where they want to direct them. So you'll see on an Amazon, you'll see maybe 4 or 5 choices for your return. Take it into an Amazon store or one of their partner stores for nothing and return it. Take it to a locker, it might be 50p or it might be free. Take it to a post office, it might be £1. Take it somewhere else, it might be £2. Get it picked up, it might be £4. So they're driving, and their algorithms are telling them what they can basically get away with in terms of charging and where they want to go. So they're playing with their algorithms all the time. In the States, for instance, all their collect and drop-offs go through their Whole Foods stores. Why wouldn't they? They reckon they generate another $50 to $100 per walk-in. And here they're doing the same with the likes of Morrison's, where they're putting up. Royal Mail are doing the same with Sainsbury's, where they do that. So again, the dynamic of that will change in terms of, at the moment, most of these operators, postal operators, parcel operators, pay the host to hold their equipment. But when they start proving, well, if you have my equipment in, the consumer's going to come in and spend £100. I want you to pay me to have my equipment in your store, right? Because I'm driving foot traffic and foot traffic that spends. So a lot of them are monitoring that. So you see when you get offers, do this and I'll give you a voucher in Morrison's, do this, I'll give you a voucher in Sainsbury's, because they want to monitor what your spend habit is when you take your return in. And of course, we talked a little bit about Vinted, but Vinted, resellers are just, it goes crazy now. I've got 2 young girls, they're on Vinted all the time. There's parcels coming in and out. They're asking to, be dropped off at the InPost locker up the road, or the Royal Mail locker, at Sainsbury's. And this is how, that's generating a huge amount of business, and they're selling stuff on Vinted, £5, £6, £7. So you can't really do that doorstep delivery when you rate so low. So you've got to look at how do you consolidate. And I think, this recon business, econ business, C2C or B2B2C or B2C, there's all different ways it's going to go through the network. I think offering this, flexibility, convenience, choice, and price are all important. And we talked about AI and how machine learning will help. Well, you're running algorithms all the time to see what can you get away with charging, where does your footfall go, what do they spend when they go there. So this isn't data you can collect easily on a spreadsheet. You've got to have some good tools to be able to collate that type of information and see what the best options are for your consumer and for your merchant. So I think the out of home will continue to develop for sure. And whereas even the likes of Royal Mail that would say we go to every address every day in years gone by, so why wouldn't we just own the doorstep? In fact, a couple of their CEOs in the past have said we own the doorstep, whereas Martin Seidenberg now says, well, we like to own the doorstep, but we also want to give convenience and choice. So you're seeing this massive deployment of drop-off and pick-up points with Royal Mail now in the last 12, 18 months. That just exceeds anything that they've done in the past, as well as the 12,000 parcels post offices where you can go. You've got the Collect Plus points. They're now converting all their mailboxes into parcel drop-off points too. So they're offering lots more choice and convenience to consumers and clients to be able to capture that market, whether it's recom and it's a C2C or whether it's ecom and it's a B2C. So I think that'll just continue in earnest.
No, thank you. And it'd be interesting to maybe look at this in 4 or 5 years' time and think how much of what we think is going to happen has happened, and other things will develop. And the disruptors, obviously, like Amazon, obviously, which is sort of hidden in plain sight, which is a proper disruptor, and obviously Vinted and a lot of others are doing what they do. So you mentioned earlier, and thanks talked about it, Bobby, you almost fell into logistics, as I did, by the way,
Yeah.
in 1990. Just a couple of last questions, if I could. So, what do you think is a common misconception about the logistics industry?
I think I think that's changed over the years, and you'd probably agree with me there. I mean, this was a dirty truck driver's business when I joined it. I mean, it was. My mum cried. You're doing what? You going where? She literally cried because it was just seen as a dead end job, really. Somewhere where you just went to and there was trucks and fuel and parcels, and it wasn't that sophisticated. And it wasn't, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't a sophisticated business back there. You didn't know what you were getting till you got it. The paperwork often came later than the parcel arrived with you, and it was all just sent together. There was no automation, no computers. Very little sophistication in that. And that's changed significantly. I mean, the development of the logistics sector over that 40 years is quite incredible. And I think the misconception is still by some people that, this isn't a career. It isn't something you should aspire to. Yet there's so many roles in this business that are really excellent roles. And I think I'd add to that, it was a very male-dominated business for the first 20 years I was in the business, very male-dominated. And in both my latter companies, TNT and in Australia Post, we've driven massive campaigns to bring more females into the working environment for a number of reasons. One is I think it's a great role. It's in I would imagine very much most of the logistics companies operate an equal pay, so women can come into the logistics business. There's no differential in pay and reward. There's lots of flexibility in it. And we see that now in a lot of the distribution models where they have casual workers, flexible workers, that it's women doing it maybe between dropping the kids off and picking the kids up, out in their car delivering parcels. So I know, for instance, my Yodel driver's a lady that's got a couple of children at the local school and she does it in between. So you've got that flexibility if you want it at that end of it. But you've also got the sophistication of, high-level financial management, computerized AI-generated simulation tools at that end. You've got property and portfolio management, legal and legal requirements through the business. You've typical roles that used to be more female were your HR and your sales and marketing, but I mean that's expanded quite considerably too. So I think the common misperceptions for me would be around male-dominated business, trucking business. Is it really a career? And I think it's a great career for male, female alike. Lots of opportunities, and they're only going to continue to develop and grow. And I think. I'd have no hesitation recommending a career in logistics, but I do say to people, it's a tough business as well, right? It's a 24/7 in most cases, right? This isn't a clock on at 9, clock off at 5. Some of the roles are, of course, but actually the business is generally running 24/7, and so it's quite demanding. And again, if I went back 30 years. And it's often something I used to say in the latter years, when did hard work stop becoming fun? The harder the job, the more difficult the gig that you got given, the more satisfaction and the more fun it was to go and do that. And I'm a bit afraid that, sometimes from the outside in, it looks quite hard work and that puts people off. But, it's also a fun industry. It's fulfilling. It's got lots of opportunities as I've managed to navigate over the years from, working in the warehouse and driving trucks for a summer job to, running a whole geography in Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, and sitting on an Asia Pac board and then running the national operator in Australia. So there's lots of opportunities to develop, but you have to knuckle down, learn the business and work well in it and work hard. But that shouldn't deter people from joining, right? If you've got that ethic, work ethic in you, I think it's a terrific business to work in.
Yeah, and logistics in the UK and all around the world drives the economy, doesn't it? It really does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing gets the shops. So thanks so much for your time, Bob. And the last question, which is tied into that. So you talk about the misconceptions. So if you was talking to someone today that was just starting out in the logistics sector, what would your advice to them be?
Yeah, I mean, great question. I did one of the bits that I loved in the role was, bringing in grads, talking to new entrants, and it's a question they ask you all the time. How do I get your job? And I'd say, well, first of all, you'd want to know what it is. You might not want it. You might you might have a look at it, and it might not be the thing that you actually want at the end of the day. But I always said to people, and I never look further than the next step, right? So you just look at the next step. What's the next step for you? Right, it's this. Well, step into that discretionary. When you get the opportunity to step into doing something that's your boss or your supervisor or or your next line manager up, then step in and help out, because there's no better way of learning than being in that role, and be ready when that role comes up that they say, look, Deborah or David, that's the obvious candidate because they've done that role. When Steve was off on holiday, they were stepping in and doing it. So step in. I think that it's a big piece for me. I'd always say to people, step up and step in. Always say yes, whatever comes your way. Never say no, right? Don't turn things down. Always have a crack, have a look. What's the worst that can happen, right? There's nothing going to kill you. Say yes and step up and step in. And the other thing is build up your network. Whatever role you're doing, build up your network. I still talk to, I went and met a guy that was a driver for me in 1985, only 2 weeks ago. Went down to Oxford. He was one of my drivers when I was an ops manager down there. Me and him went out, had a cup of coffee and a chat. You keep your network strong. It's a business that's quite incestuous. A lot of people stick in the business and are around. So build your network out, because there's nothing beats really being in touch with a lot of people, having genuine relationships with them, and knowing where you can ask for help and mentorship as well. So I think there'd be the three things: step up, step in, say yes. And whilst you're doing that, build your network. And if you do those things, and they're just basics, they're fundamentals. If you do that, you'll do all right. And I'd just say finally, be generous with your time and be kind. Nobody likes an idiot, right? So be generous with your time and be kind.
No, that's wonderful. I just want to say thank you so much, Bob, for your time. Some great perspective on the industry and some great advice. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. Really good to chat to you, David.